something called the drama triangle. We've kind of reframed it into what we call the oppression trap triangle. There's a victim archetype, the villain archetype, and then there's hero archetype that we call the victor. They come to the aid of the victim, whether the victim asks for it or not.
Oof.
If you look at what's happening online right now, post-election, all this stuff, the person that's in the victor space that is stepping in to protect the parties they believe are now being attacked, they don't even necessarily know the person. It's not that you just don't support and help people, but the energy to which you do it matters tremendously for your own health. We're not saying, well, just don't be a victim.
You can be victimized without being a victim. You can support somebody without, this is my job. I am
did
the
this
person
for you.
to rescue you. We hold on to these things because there's a secondary gain to it. And the secondary gain to being in a victim space is I receive attention, I receive love.
I had 20-something broken bones by the time I was in my early 20s, a coma, crazy stuff, because I was in the I am a victim. Then we get more attack because we are co-creating a dynamic. And that's kind of what's been skipped with a lot in the coaching field, the psychedelic field, because usually people go to psychedelics out of desperation. They're now the hero, the victor of themselves. The problem with that is when you're in the victor role, swinging from that victim space, you're still trying to make up for what you weren't.
This is not just about psychedelic experiences. This is about any transformational experience. You still have all those old parts that you may have not integrated. Now, what do I do about that?
Well, damn. Welcome. It was so great to catch up. It was back in like mid-December, I guess, where we had the update kind of gathering here. And it's been a while since I'd seen y'all. And then Sean had shared that he'd been doing a lot of work with you guys over the years.
Yeah.
He did.
Which is, I think a lot of the stuff we'll talk about today will be centered around that and then the individual work that you both do. But it's been great. Tah, you and I back, I guess in the early days of, 2020, 2021, we connected over at my place for some workouts.
Yeah.
And part of that big kind of men's group that was gathering and
That Preston Smiles put together.
Yeah. Preston was a big part of that. Yeah. And it was amazing. I mean, it started out with, there were probably 5 or 6 of us the first couple of times. And then it grew to, we'd have into the 40s, and it was like, that was right about the limit. I could set up 15 stations with 3 guys at each, and that was about it. But just such a magical season to go through that. And, I had left for the summer, so that that was the end of it. But I thought it was such a beautiful season, and it was a great representation of what was unfolding here for men in Austin. That seemed very different, especially, coming out of 2020, where people were still very unsure about what was going on and they had different levels of indoctrination. We were kind of in our own bubble. And what I loved about those workouts is people would move to town and they wouldn't really know anybody. And so they would know one guy who was maybe working out, and they would come, and all of a sudden they got to meet 20, 30, 40, and the guys would go out to breakfast afterwards. And it was such a fluid kind of transition for people. And I just look back on that period. I don't want to reintroduce it and do it again. But it was like a moment in time where everything came together, and so many great things have come out of that in my life. They're just so grateful for guys like you showing up.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be there and to witness what you've created. You've been a huge inspiration for me in a lot of ways. So thank you for that, man. And, I did connect with a lot of, that event, that dynamic was a hub spot for me with connecting with a lot of people. Mike Dillard is actually the person who's like, he's come to this workout with me. Yeah. And so I was like, sure, let's go. Yeah.
Dillard too. It's like not a workout guy, so to speak, right? But understood the value of community and showing up. And that was the beauty of those workouts, as like you were on the fittest end of the range, but we had guys of all abilities and fitness levels that there were adaptations for everybody. So just do what you can do, but just do the work, share the work. Like, let's do this together. Yeah. It was so cool. But what I'm excited about today, and I've been learning more about your work, just kind of prepping for today, but just really learning more about you, and your story, which is fascinating.
So fascinating.
Well, your story, like I can't, both y'all, like I'm like, I knew nothing of this stuff. So I just knew I loved you guys, but it makes sense. I think the people that I'm most drawn to have had real fucking life experience. They have been through it. So they understand when it fucking sucks and when you feel like you're out of options, and to make your way back to, where you are today is incredible. And I'm excited to get into those stories, but just that, and I've talked about this a lot on the podcast, but this archetype of the wounded healer is my favorite. If I had to pick one, and I love the people who have been down and whatever their challenges, hardship, whatever it was, it became their gift when they really worked with it. And the work that you guys do now is all about, I'm guessing part of it is transmuting all that stuff that I think we're brought up to think that stuff is all bad. I can't believe this happened. And then get into that victim mentality. And it's very useful for controlling people to keep them in that mindset.
So effective.
Yes.
It's intoxicating.
It is.
I've been there.
I was mainlining it for years. I made a lot of money because of it, so I can't be mad at it. But it is what it is.
It's a huge part of what we teach people about that drama triangle. That we base a lot of our media, our movies, our stories, the hero's journey, all of that stuff is baked into society. And that's what keeps us stuck. And it's a huge part of what we teach our students.
Talk a little bit more about the triangle.
Yeah, well,
for people who haven't heard of that before.
So there's something called the drama triangle that has three corners. It's a triangle. And the way we've kind of reframed it into what we call the oppression trap triangle. And so there's a victim archetype, there's the villain archetype, and then there's the hero archetype that we call the victor. And so the victor can be a rescuer, a savior, a martyr. This is the person that we call the steward of righteousness. They come to the aid of the victim, whether the victim asks for it or not.
Oof.
And so this is where we get stuck.
I got goosebumps when you said that.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we have the villain, who we call the harbinger of malice. And this is the person that brings the tragedy to the victim, or is perceived to bring tragedy to the victim.
Because you can be a projected villain, even though that's not their experience.
And then we have the victim, which we call the guardian of peril. This person holds on to the energy of perilous dynamics, of being hurt, of being harmed, of being in a space of loss, deficit, injury, death, pain. We call those the 7 attributes of violence. This person is identifying with being in that space all the time. They've baked it into who they are. And so you can be victimized without being a victim. You can support somebody without being a hero or a rescuer. You can, if you're falling down, I'm going to support you, but I don't have to wear the identity of I'm the person who rescued Cal, right?
You're not going to pick me up off the ground. You may offer a hand if I want help getting off the ground, but you're not going to take it upon yourself to hoist me to my feet.
Well, I might if your leg's broken. delete, right?
Yes.
But this is supporting someone is not being the identity of this is my job. I am the person to rescue you. Give me praise. They are righteous in that space. And so if I'm supporting other human beings, it's because another human being needs support and I am seeing a reflection of myself. And so that's why I'm supporting them. I don't need accolades and all of that other stuff based on what I did.
If you look at what's happening online right now, post-election, all this stuff. So the person that's in the victor space is the one that is stepping in to protect the parties they believe are now being attacked. But they don't even necessarily know the person. So it's like they're stepping in to be like, I have to save them. But it's almost, that's what we call like when someone is an activist, they're activated and they're usually operating from this triangle. and talking, if you want to, or we have the space to break down how it's oppressive dynamics. Because once you start to understand that it's not that you just don't support and help people, but the energy to which you do it matters tremendously for your own health, for the sustainability of society, and for growth overall.
And, we talk about how these identities get baked into the nervous system. If you get a rise from rescuing people, it's like, oh, snap, this feels awesome. It feels wonderful. And so I make an identity out of it, and then I build my body around that. So I have a very keen radar for people who are in the victim space. And I have a very keen radar for who I perceive as the villain. And so I will go and attack people that I feel are villainous based on an archetype that I've projected. Right. And so if I go and I attack somebody that I perceive as a villain that is not actually villainous, I'm actually putting that person that's the villain into the victim space. Mm-hmm. And so they will need somebody to rescue them. And so we get stuck in these corners and these triangles. And it happens in family life. It happens in political life. It happens in marriages. Business. It happens all over the place. When we hold on to one of those identities, we become stuck. It's an oppressive dynamic. And when we look at oppression in the work that we do, we don't judge oppression. Oppression serves something, and it serves to keep something somewhere, right? And so if I put a fence up and there's a dog behind the fence, am I oppressing the dog from getting into my property, right? Am I oppressing the dog from biting? I'm oppressing that dog. And that is a convenient space. And there's one overlord to oppression. There's one thing that serves oppression, and that is convenience. Any oppressive dynamic is conveniencing the oppressor at the inconvenience of the oppressed. That's it. And when you look at it from that lens, you can dissect and pull apart any oppressive dynamic. But when we put it on an archetype of villain, victim, and victor, that's where the trap is. We build these things into our bodies, and then we live on this unconsciously, and we're constantly looking to rescue people. We're constantly pointing the finger. We're constantly, woe is me. And we hold on to these things because there's a secondary gain to it. And the secondary gain to a victim being in a victim space is I receive energy, I receive attention, I receive love.
Significance.
I am the focal point. So this triangle does not exist if there's no victim. The victim is the most powerful space in the triangle. It's the focus of the villain and it's the focus of the victor. And when we look at these things in our world, if you remove yourself from being in the victim situation, like, hey, listen, this happened to me. I got to keep it moving. I'm not claiming that. Then there's no reason to point the finger at anybody else and call them the villain. That person did this. I'm moving away from that dynamic or that situation. Have we built a system to make sure that they're fortified, that they don't need to villainize anybody anymore? And there's no reason for a hero because there's nobody to rescue.
This conversation, we have event after event, people get triggered by this conversation. Funny to get triggered in the oppression trap triangle. But it always happens because they'll say, yeah, but if someone's, there are victims and, we have to protect victims. What the invitation here is not that suddenly we just go, oh, well, it's a mindset thing and you just don't get in the triangle. We can have consequence to actions without playing the role in the power dynamic.
Okay.
Right? Because it doesn't mean that suddenly, well, no, you just say you're not a victim anymore. There's a difference, like Tah said, to being a victim as the I am. I am the one that is being hurt, harm, injury, deficit, attracting all these things. It's another to have been victimized. When we hold on to the identity, then we get more attack because we are co-creating a dynamic. So if I say I am a victim, my likelihood to be victimized is on repeat because it's a present tense. It becomes a verb. I am a victim. And so it's a perpetual thing versus I was victimized or this person took advantage or whatever. So it's finding that place of we're not saying that suddenly, well, just don't be a victim. We're saying that you can have consequence for society. And because we consequence with sequence, if you do this, here is what happens in that sequence without it co-creating the dynamic. Because if you're out rescuing people, we used to call Tah Captain Save a Ho. It could be ho-hos or bro-hos, they-hos, all the hoes.
Yeah.
Out in these streets.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to help.
Yeah.
But what would happen is then he would attract more. Yeah. These crazy Austin streets. It's crazy out here. And so what would happen though is if there is someone there to be the victor, then to get love and significance, people will unconsciously get hurt, like hurt themselves. Mm-hmm. I had 20 something broken bones by the time I was in my early 20s, 3 traumatic brain injuries, a coma, crazy stuff, because I was in the I am a victim of Murphy's Law. That's how I lived my life. And so it wasn't like I could just have awareness to that and everything changed. But some part of my body learned that when I'm hurt, I get love and attention. My parents worked full time. I played a lot of sports. As I got like further along in my sports, then injuries would happen right on the verge of the next big breakthrough because I couldn't fail if I got injured. Oh, yeah. Unconscious. And we've worked with athletes, pro athletes, like it was always at the last big game, the last big moment. And for us, that's our body coming in to save us. And it's like we're experiencing the physical pain so that we don't have to experience the emotional pain. And there's like all these layers of intricacy to the victim. And so the thing is for me is once I recognized that pain had become this blanket of comfort, it had become my best friend. It became the one thing I could count on no matter what. And if I didn't want to feel something, like everything I refused to feel in my emotions and things that happened became the pain I couldn't ignore in my body. And so it's not just this mindset thing. It becomes a full nervous system operating procedure for your body that is a lot of layers to undo, to unwind, to detach from, so that I can show up in the world and not get love and significance from some traumatic injury so that everyone would flock to me for love. Because I grew up thinking I was too much or not enough, and some strange combination of both, growing up LDS in Utah, then having assaults on my sexuality at 8 that internalized shame that I thought I was already ruined. So like that story then was I didn't want to talk to anyone, and that deep contraction meant pain was the only path to connection to outside of myself. So it's like the intricacy of this triangle is not just us saying, well, don't be a victim. Oh, you're being a victim. It's actually, it becomes a cellular experience.
It's a full human experience. Thank you for sharing that, girl.
Yes.
My brother, okay, as a child, there was a lot of physical violence in my household. And my brother was physically violent in my direction.
Older brother?
My older brother.
Yeah.
Physically violent. I wet the bed until I was 14. And so my brother had a lot of reason to dislike me. I had to share a room with him and all of these things. And we were born really close together in age, like 23 months apart. And so there was jealousy and all of this stuff that happened with him in my direction. And so there was a lot of physical violence. And I took that, and for my life until my 40s, I was blaming my brother for so many woes in my life. Everything my brother did. And every opportunity I got, I rallied people around that. And so what I was doing was I was looking for people to rescue me from the hurt that I felt my whole life. And I claimed victim to my brother. And anytime that I would have friends, they would see my brother and their face would twist up, right? And because they're projecting villain on him. So they're jumping in the triangle with me, right? And so they're there to rescue me from my brother. My brother's the villain. I'm looking at my brother's the villain. I'm the victim. I'm being fortified by this dynamic. And so this went around and around and around until I started to explore psychedelics. And this is where I started to see where I was in this dynamic. And I also learned that the physical dynamics that happen between me and my brother have fortified me with a lot of strength, a lot of courage, a lot of really amazing gifts. So if I'm going to blame my brother for all the horror, I have to blame my brother for the awesome as well. And I brought a lot of this into my dynamics. Man, shout out to my brother, Ralph. He's an amazing dude. He had his things that he had to navigate, and he's still navigating, But I had to come to peace with myself and remove myself from being the victim of my brother. My brother was going through some stuff, and he put his hands on me, right? That doesn't make him a bad guy. He put his hands on me. Now, what do I do about that? What's my strategy? Where were my parents? I also put my parents into the villain space because they didn't rescue me. And I wanted them to rescue me. And so I wasn't seen. I was alone. And so what I did was I went outside and I found other people to rally to my cause. I was activating. And so being in the victim space, I sent out what we call the virtue signal.
Oh, we're familiar with that. Right? Sure.
So the energy,
Instagram, anyone?
the energy that moves through this triangle, we call tantrum energy. And so a tantrum is when a child is like a child having a tantrum is they're not getting their way.
Yeah.
They're being oppressed. And so what they do is they send off the virtue. They either transform themselves into the rescuer, into the hero, the victor, or they send the signal out. Mommy, daddy's not giving me a cookie.
It's the bat signal.
And, right? It's the bat signal. And so we send out the virtue signal, we get rescued, and then the rescuer oppresses the villain to stop the villain from oppressing the victim. And we get trapped in this triangle. And so that's what I was doing with my brother. I was rallying people to my cause. And so there was a projection of energy at my brother on unconscious levels from people that I knew. People were calling my brother asshole. People were calling my brother stupid. People were like, that motherfucker, like all these different things. And I had to pull the reins back on this because I love him. You know, right? He's an amazing human being. And I'm projecting stuff that he did or that was done to me or that I was participatory in as a child. And I'm still projecting this on this person years later. I won't let it go because I've put myself into the identity of a victim and I've put him into the identity of the villain. And so this broadcast is how I see him and how I perceived him. And when I let go of that, my body got to relax in ways that I can't explain in words. I can't express in words. And this is what I've done to deconstruct so many things in my life. The relationship with my mother. My mother is both a hero for me and a villain for me. And so I would see my mother in these two spaces and I would just flip them back and forth in a triangle, but I would stay in the victim space of my mother. My mother didn't love me enough. I'm not there, but I need my mother to rescue me and love me more so that I don't feel this way. And then my mother's in both angles of the triangle and I'm stuck. And so when I removed these labels, these identities, my body got to relax and I got to create a body around freedom instead of a body around a prison. And that changed my life dramatically. I had insomnia for 30 years, Cal. 30. I'm 53 now, right? We're the same age, right?
Yeah.
I am 53 now. And I had insomnia for 30 years from when I was 14 until I was 44.
That is bananas.
I didn't sleep more than 4 hours.
It was a crazy experience because we started seeing each other in 2013. We knew each other since 2010, but we started seeing each other in 2013. And I'd never seen anything like that. We're not talking about like he's just sitting up, not sleeping. He would lay down. And I learned that if he fell asleep, not to move, because if anything woke him up, then he's just up. He was working nights at the hospital for 12 hours. Then he would go do personal training clients after work in the morning at the park. Then in the evenings, he would do personal training clients or fitness classes. Then he was DJing on the weekends. Like he worked nights and still had full days. And so he'd come over to my house midday and even just like take a nap. And he wouldn't just like wake up. He would jump up like a bear was attacking him and just like start like throwing his clothes on or something. And it's because my experience at that point was he had so much he was managing. He was afraid he was going to miss something because he had clients and things. And he's always been a very committed person and keep his word. And so he'd be asleep and the way he would jump up, one, it would scare me. But when we first, like I got into the habit that if he started to move, I would grab him, pull him in and say, it's Tuesday, it's 8:30 in the morning. You don't have a client this morning. Like it was almost as if it was some like CPTSD type response to even being asleep. It was intense.
Sleep was an enemy to me.
Really?
Yeah. So if I went to sleep and I wet the bed,
right?
I wet the bed, my mother was angry. Well, there were things that happened where my mattress was put up against the wall so that it would air out and people would come over and be like, oh my God, what's that? And like all the shame around wetting the bed. And so it was a big thing for me as a kid that sleep was a problem. And so I associated sleep with detriment,
shame
and all of these things. So all of the things that had to do with staying awake would counter the sleep dynamic. And so I got into this habit of not going to sleep. My one of the things that happened with my brother is he would tell people that I went to bed in school. And so everybody would be like, yeah, you at the bed. And there was all this shame. And so going to school was shameful. All of these things would happen. And so when I got accepted to high school, I got accepted to the same high school my brother went to. I didn't, and I was like, I'm going to go to this high school. And he did not want me in this high school. And I was terrified that he was going to tell everybody at school that I went to bed. And so that is where, when I was 14, that is where my body just decided we're not going to sleep anymore.
It's not safe to sleep.
And so I just didn't go to sleep. And so I would doze off in class. I would listen to things and doze off in class. I would have shades on in class. And that would be the only place that I would get sleep. But at home, I wasn't sleeping. And my body got programmed around this. And so this dysregulation happened. And there was no circadian rhythm. And it was just on and on and on. And so when I went to sleep, if I actually fell into the sleep and I felt like I had to go to the bathroom, my body would jump. I would jump up, and that was it. And I'm just up all night.
I didn't get very much sleep that first year.
Wired. Shit. Wired. And down the road, after the explorations around psychedelics and being with this amazing person, one night she came over to my house with Henry, my chihuahua, right? She came over with Henry. And we sat there, and I went to sleep for 6 hours. And I was like,
that had just like never happened.
What is going on? And then I started blaming her for Kole's the remedy. And so after about 6 months of my sleep going up and up and up, I backtracked to what happened that night. And that night that she came over, we had
it wasn't just a good brown chicken, brown cow night. That's what you're thinking.
So we sat. We actually didn't brown chicken, brown cow.
I know.
Wait, did I just make that into a verb?
You did. It's official.
To brown chicken, brown cow. Put that in the dictionary. So I'm going to say it again. We didn't brown chicken, brown cow that night, but she told, I told her things that I had never told another human being in my life. Oof. Never in my life. My life has been built on lies and secrets. And since I was trying to get everybody to see me a certain way, not peeing in the bed, strong, cool, not rocking the boat.
You were a hip hop artist. You were too cool for school, kid.
There was a lot of things that I was being dishonest about. That I like flashy colors. I mean, I'm wearing gray right now, but I usually have a lot of colorful stuff on. Yeah. And I was lying. When I was a kid, I asked my mother, how come I'm so close in age to my brother? And she said, well, you're the surprise baby. We didn't plan for you. And I took that as, you're a mistake. Mm-hmm. You don't belong here. I don't want you. And so I built this whole life around making sure my mother never saw anything out that I perceived would be outside of her grace. So I lied to my mother meticulously. I lied to my father meticulously, and I learned how to lie. And that night that Kole came over, I told Kole things I'd never told another person, and I got to let my body relax. And in that space, I learned that every lie that we create for every person, the brain is actually working to make that image come out. And so I started to dive into the realizations around the human brain uses about 20 to 25% of your resources when you're awake and not doing anything.
Like literally
right?
at rest.
Like laying there. Mm-hmm. But when you start to be dishonest and you start having to craft your environment, the brain usage goes up more and more and more. And so I had lies for all these people that my body was holding on to. And those lies were built into the insomnia space. And my body was hypervigilant. So I was always pumping cortisol, always pumping adrenaline, always pumping these things that were keeping me wired. And so when I got to tell her this stuff, and she looked at me and she didn't flinch, my body actually got to relax in a way that it had never relaxed before. So what I started doing is I started getting on the phone with people and saying, hey, I need to share something with you. Well, what? Oh, I was dishonest with you about this years ago. And then I would have this resolve. And so my sleep started to increase more and more and more. And that's when I started to recognize the ideas around being honest with the self and being true to the self and who I am foundationally, not just the identities that have been placed on me. And this is why the triangle is such an interesting space, because I had built the triangle into a lot of the lies about myself and the people around me. So that being honest with her and having a safe place to land allowed me to get into a space where I can actually sleep, man.
And you've somehow turned this into the work that you do now.
Yeah.
That was certainly never our intention, right? I mean, it's like, how did you get here? I'm like,
it's the beauty. That's why it works.
Totally.
Because you were guided by something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the thing is, we were committed to our own journeys. And that's kind of what's been skipped with a lot of what we're seeing out in the coaching field, the psychedelic field, is what I'm seeing is, going back to that triangle, victim, villain, or victor. When you step into the victor role, say someone has a psychedelic experience that changes everything in that moment. It makes sense that someone would want to share that with everyone, to be like, holy cow, I found self-love and connection, and this is amazing. I want to share it. But what can happen in this triangle is if you've been in a victim role, health, wealth, relationships, because usually people go to psychedelics out of desperation, right? They can't get the answer. So they've been victimized by something, or they're in the victim space. They have a reclamation of self. They rescue themselves. They're now the hero, the victor of themselves. The problem with that is when you're in the victor role, swinging from that victim space, is that you're still trying to make up for what you weren't. It's a powerful place in that reclamation to get it back. But when I look back now, when I was in that phase, by 18 years old, I was speaking on national stages, the Montel Williams show, on the dangers of club drugs, because I'd been in a coma from an overdose. It was technically contaminated batch of GHB, but story for another day. And what happened was then I became a poster child with my story. But I started to see how I was being manipulated and prostituted for my traumas. And my last speaking engagement, I went to get on stage, and it was a military conference. And because at this point I was making $5,000 an hour. So at 20 years old, I didn't know many 20-year-olds making that, right?
Oh, good God.
Yeah. So, and then it's like, and what else am I going to do? I didn't graduate from high school. Where else am I going to make money? But what I saw was, from swinging in that reclamation, I was walking and operating in my life from shame and obligation and guilt. The not enoughness was, I'm trying to make up for everything that I've ever done wrong, with penance, retribution. It's like I have to make up for everything that is wrong about me out in the world. So that rescue thing was super dysregulated. And what I actually attracted was more victims looking for someone to validate that they were being harmed. And I was getting 200 plus emails a day. And it was in that moment that I saw, we don't have an addiction problem in this country. We have a trauma problem. We have a resiliency problem. Because I'm sitting here at 20 years old. I'm not a therapist. I'm certainly not trauma informed and all the fancy words people use now. But what I could do was tell people, I see you. And I don't have the answers. But if I got through it, you can get through it too. And that's all I had. But there was a moment before I got on stage at that conference that whoever's in charge, big guy, he said, well, on your story, leave this part out. Don't say anything about this. Really focus on this. And it was in that moment that I realized I was being used and I wasn't really helping people. And I'd hear people say it all the time. And that's what fed the victim role. You're such a brave girl. Wow, you've overcome it. That was a drug right there. You want to talk about addiction? Tell someone how powerful they are for not using. Because then that's the only value I had. Letting go of that badge was the hardest step I ever took, was to take off the heavy burden of being an addict. Because I never was, Cal. Society told me I was. What I was a kid with a lot of trauma, with parents that didn't have the skills. My parents were incredible. My parents didn't have the skills. The Mormon religion didn't have the skills. The people in my community didn't have the skills. And what they saw was a troubled youth. They didn't see a broken kid. And when I started to approach things that way, I saw that I wasn't helping by upholding this story and this life. So I stepped away from speaking and I said, someday I think I'll help people again. But I have to heal this. Because I had a moment that this message came through that if I didn't change the way that I felt about myself, I was going to get leukemia. Because I hated myself so deeply that I didn't think I deserved suicide. And so I would kill myself from the inside out. And so it was in that moment that I said, okay, everything has to change, but where do I start? Where do you start from there? By 23, I was married a Mormon guy, the nice guy my parents loved, the most toxic relationship I was ever in. Because culturally, Mormons don't like negative emotions and we're not taught how to deal with them. And you've got to have gratitude. And so then you compare your traumas and go, but I don't have the right to feel the way that I feel for things that happened because I'm privileged. And so in this like dichotomy of existence that I actually had very capital T traumas and no one to really help me. It was the substance use in my teens that gave me just enough connection through other people to survive longer until I could get what I needed to get. And so, getting back to psychedelics after being away from them for 7 years, I had to then face all of the stories that I had about being an addict, falling out of control, all the thousands of kids. I mean, I spoke at universities, like tens of thousands of people. So then I had to face this. Am I a hypocrite? Am I a liar? Am I, so all of this confrontation of self that in retrospect, of course I wouldn't change any of it. But if it hadn't been for psychedelics, I could not have reknown myself. I knew it in my mind, all these things, but my body still didn't know. My health conditions by 26, I couldn't even walk anymore because the swelling in my knees, I had hypothyroidism, endometriosis, I'd had an ovarian torsion, migraines. I mean, the list just goes on. And it was all of the trauma in my body and the diet and lifestyle choices as a result of coping mechanisms that, when I changed my diet and lifestyle, that resolved maybe like 60% of my symptoms, but the other 40% was trauma and self-hate. And I had to resolve that to actually get to my body to a state of ease so it could heal. We've worked with, this is why we ended up with so many biohackers, functional medicine doctors, people who they hit a brick wall and the biohacking was buying them more time, but not more ease. And so until we confront those aspects of the self, of the past, and learn how to be with them, love them, integrate them, I was trying to cut out the parts that I thought were dead and bad and wrong. But what they needed was to have someone actually acknowledge them and breathe life back into them.
I just want to honor that beautiful share, and just there's so much in there. So just wanted to breathe a little bit.
It was something.
There's a lot of different things going through my head right now. One, I've just on one point that you just mentioned, I've kind of biohacked the shit out of myself. And to your point, it's a part of the puzzle. You still got to deal with yourself. And so I've been on that journey, and fortunately through the help of some beautiful guides in plant medicine as well, has been opening a door for me to walk through. So that's been amazing. What I really want to know is what from that moment, what is the journey back looked like that has got you here today?
There were so many layers that step one was just trusting myself again. Step one was just by acknowledging one, I had to fully allow myself to experience the pain and disappointment of the adults in my life growing up. That was step one.
What's that look like for people? Because I think we all have a version of that.
Yeah. Well, because I love my parents, right? And so I never wanted to blame them. And there was some responsibility as adults in my life, not just my parents, but people in my church, relatives, people that, would be the ideal outcome for an adult caring for younger humans that didn't have skills or tools or anyone to lean on. The school system, and not recognizing that as a troubled youth and getting kicked out of 3 high schools, that's not happenstance, that's consequence, cone sequence, back to that sequence thing. This happens, right? I was a textbook case of childhood trauma or childhood adverse experiences that caused that. And so what it looked like for me to first look at it was in guided psychedelic experiences, having a guide there that could step in the role of someone I needed to talk to and speak my truth from the child, from the 8-year-old, of disappointment, of hurt, of where were you? Why couldn't you be brave? If I had to go through it, why couldn't you be brave enough to see me? And just actually feel that. And by actually allowing myself to feel that and process that, I could let it go. I didn't have to have those conversations with every adult that I felt disappointed by. But what that allowed me to do was then to see the little kid in them that had the disappointment and the hurt, but not until I could see it in myself. And then from there, I could move into forgiveness, true forgiveness. Not like I forgive them from this conceptual space, but from an embodied place. My relationships all changed as a result of that. There wasn't a charge anymore. There wasn't a wall up anymore. And I couldn't have found, at least to my current knowing, another way to do that other than I've been very blessed with psychedelic and plant medicine and indigenous elders and people along my path that were just the medicine at that time. Not only the master teacher in plant, animal, or fungi form, but as people. And to me, that returning to myself made me realize that I knew everything about myself at 14 years old. And I've been returning back to what I knew when I was 14, that people taught me was wrong, bad, broken, too much, not enough. And so by getting back to that place, I started to raise myself again. And there was one ceremony in particular where there was a man at this, it was a group ceremony in California. So this guy that's a participant, he's not even a facilitator. But I was going there. I had just left my husband, my husband, and because I now have a husband, so it's my husband. And I knew that I was going to have a tough conversation with my parents, right? LDS, Mormons, divorce, big deal. And I went into this ceremony, and it was like a sassafras or a MDMA heart opener experience. And I'm talking to him and he was getting like teary-eyed. He's like, have you ever just loved someone so much that you cried? And he was talking about his wife and his daughter and just how deeply he loved them. And I'm looking at him and I was like, no, I haven't. Or he said, have you ever been so happy you cried? And I was like, no. And then I'm looking at him and I watched his heart break for me. And I was like, oh, great. Put it on the pile of things wrong with me. Fantastic. Oh, wow, I've got a whole Rolodex we'll work through someday. And we start talking about it. I said, no, I haven't. And he walked me through a visualization exercise because now I'm kind of dropping into the experience. And he basically, to summarize, he took me back to the day before the assaults on my sexuality started when I was 8 years old. And in the Mormon religion, you get baptized at 8. So I got clean and ruined within a week was what happened in my 8-year-old mind. And he took me back to the day before it happened and had me scoop little me up and take me to Disneyland. And he had me talk through what rides we went on and us laughing together. What he actually did in that moment was help me integrate that part back. Because at the end of that visualization, he said, okay, the sun is setting. It's the end of the day. Now it's time for you to take her back home to her timeline. And my heart sank because I knew what was going to happen to her the next day. And he said, but this time, she's not going to go back there. She's going to come and live with you. And he helped me take a deep breath and pull her into my heart. I got my innocence back. That changed everything. If you look at, we took photos at the park the next day. And we'd all been journeying up all night, right? And there's a light in my eyes that had not been there. Anytime you saw me smiling in a photo, that light wasn't there. And so that is how it approached. But it's like, how do you explain that to someone? I'm like, oh, well, I went and got my innocence back. Like, what do you mean? It was parts work for people that are in NLP or internal family systems. Like there's other ways besides psychedelics. But that heightened visualization was really correct for me. It allowed me to envision and see and really pull that part in. So then I started to do parts work with myself year by year, age by age, and raise myself. and go back to the parts and pieces I had cut off to survive. Because I thought I was like a rocket ship. It's just got to go to break through the atmosphere. Then I realized, no, it was more like an animal caught in a trap. I gnawed off my foot to get out of there. And so this process has been a step by step. I've been in this work for 16 years. It's not new. And I was on my own path for 6 years before I brought Tah to his first one. And so I did the work on my own first. And Tah had been doing work on his own first. And people are skipping that. And we've watched in the last 2 years, the people that skipped the work got brought back to it hard. Because you can't skip it. You could pause it to help people for a little while. You know, when we're in a triage situation, an emergency situation for humanity, sometimes we have to pause our process. But you can't stop it, because I promise you it's coming back around.
Thanks again.
Welcome back. A journey through Kole.
Dang.
Welcome to Kole.
Yeah, that is a journey through Kole. Thank you.
It is.
Integration is a big deal.
Yeah, I think there's and that gets kind of said a lot, right, in the medicine space. You know, the medicine can open it up, but like, it's all about the integration. That's the important work. And those aren't just words, right? But I feel like a lot of people intend to integrate and they just don't know how. They have this amazing experience. Where do they go wrong? How is your approach different? Give me the goods.
I can give it.
Come on.
First of all, people don't know what integration is.
Oh, there you go.
They don't.
And so when you have a lens for what integration is, then you can move into integrating. But people are like, oh, you need to go for integration. What's that? Well, you sit in a circle and you talk about your stuff and then you go home. Integration for us at the Condor Approach and for the work that we do with individual people is wholeness. When you are disintegrated, there are things that have been broken apart. There are things that have been separated from one another. So when you bring them all together, they are cohesive. And there's information that we have that's foundational, intuitive. It's the knowing that we have as human beings when we come onto this planet. And we are taught from programming and societal dynamics to disintegrate from your internal knowing, to behave and to integrate with society.
To be in order.
And so you've integrated with societal rules, but you've disintegrated with your inherent self. And when we have psychedelic experiences, we are able to disintegrate from those things and actually see the foundational self for a while. Oh my gosh, this is who I am. This is what I am. And then after the psychedelic experience, you go back into the other integration. And so you become disintegrated from yourself, integrated into society or constructs. And this is where, how do you get the foundational self and the societal constructs to work together? That's where we create a different type of wholeness that people are unaware of. And the biohacking and the fitness and getting your nutrition together is one aspect of becoming whole on a physical level. But if there are aspects of you as an individual that have been pushed by the wayside, buried, put into different areas of your fascia for addressing later on, those things need to be integrated. And once you have a psychedelic experience and you're able to see all of this, and then you go back to your job, you go back to your career, you go back to your caustic relationships, right? That with other people who are disintegrated, then most people just sink back into the old patterns. Yeah. And so you're neuroplastic after a psychedelic experience, which means you're malleable, which means you can get embedded even deeper into the old constructs and systems. Starting to have awareness that the sandcastle has actually been dismantled into all these different parts. How do you want to rebuild that sandcastle? How much water do you want to add? Do you want to just use a pail to shape it? Or do you want to get little sticks and kind of really make things intricate? This is where integration is. And once you're able to see from different lenses in the psychedelic experience, what tools do you have to actually see yourself outside of it? And so when we have things like the oppression trap triangle, and we teach people this way before they go into a psychedelic experience, or even right before it, they have a lens and they're able to see these things differently. So when they get out, they know if they're playing victim. They know if they're broadcasting villain. They know if they're rescuing and being a victor. And they have that one. That's one tool of the many things that we offer people around integration is the oppression trap triangle. And it's saved I can't tell you how many years people are like, oh my gosh, I wish I knew this 20 years ago, because it's changed my relationship dynamics. We've had therapists come to the Condor Approach and like, I wish I knew this stuff 20 years ago. My clients would have different relationships with their lives, and they've taken this and applied it to their practices, and it's changed everything. And this is not just about, just 1 second, this is not just about psychedelic experiences. This is about any transformational experience where you can become different than you were. You still have all those old parts that you may have not integrated. And so being able to take those things and bring them together in a marriage where they're all working flawlessly, that is integration.
That's one of the things I love about the work you do is it just doesn't have to be about plant medicine. And if that's what you want to do, that is a huge part of it. So that is offered. And if that's not what you're called to, and if you're not called to it, don't do it. This is applicable to you as well.
Yeah. People are going through, like you'll hear the term ego death in psychedelics, right? And it's almost like become an objective where people are like, they need to get the ego death as if that's going to save them time. It's usually the high performers that are like, well, if 2 grams is good, 10 must be great. Or if I had ayahuasca for 3 days in Costa Rica, maybe if I go to the jungle for a month, I'll just purge it all out and come back clean and brand new, right? Well, it doesn't really work that way. It's kind of like remodeling a house. It's one thing to move the furniture around, but if you start going for load-bearing walls, like your childhood woundings, your relationship with your parents, experiences that are happening, and you take a sledgehammer to it, the roof's going to cave in. We have created structures we call like a psychotecture. What is your inner psychotecture? Because we can see what's load-bearing so that before you go do any work, having a child, becoming a first-time mother is an ego death. Who you were is not who you are on the other side of that. But how do you integrate it? For us, postpartum depression is not just a chemical change. It's a change of self, a grieving process of the former self that many don't have language and can't acknowledge. But when we see, of course, they're grateful for the child. Of course, they're grateful for this, but they're mourning the past selves that no longer exist. There's a great book called Your Symphony of Selves by Jordan Gruber, and he co-wrote it with James Fadiman. And it's all about how parts work, basically, that you have all these different selves. So the self you were before that was rocking your business and, as a woman and independent, those were all identities that no longer exist. And so your body can go through a mourning process. How do you integrate it? So as Tah said, it's not integrating psychedelics. We haven't been taught how to integrate life and big changes. How often do we see men retire or they sell their business, a big buyout or something, right? A big exit. Then they have a full either health crash or relationship crash because they don't know who they are anymore. Because everything was so wrapped up in the identity that built the business. I watched my brother go through it. He had $100 million exited in business that he spent like 16, 17 years building. So when that's been your whole identity, who are you without those parts?
And he was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've had friends this has happened to where we are told in society that that's what you're supposed to do. You build this business, you sell it to someone else for a big exit and you get out and you do that and it's over like that. Sure, you have the money and all that brings, and then the purpose is gone. And all you didn't realize that you had the thing that you got to try to redo the thing you just did. And it's not there. You can't do it. And I just hear men just grieve that old, like I had it. I did it. I did the thing. But I followed this, again, back to what you were talking about, this whole kind of, I love the concept of just like disintegrating in the medicine, but we get reintegrated into these old paradigms. I mean, it's why I do the podcast, right? It's like I had my disintegration. It's like, I'm fucking doing all this wrong. I got to see all the things. And so this has been a journey for me to start to undo all those old agreements and they come back and they come stronger. Like it is a journey and I'll be on it until the day I die,
and you might still be on it after that. Let's be fair. You don't know.
Let's be fair. Yeah. But I just love that whole framework.
Well, and even when people retire from work, how often, Tah, 30 plus years as a nurse, he watched nurses retire and die within the year because people work themselves to death. They go for retirement, I just got 10 more years here, but you're watching their body fall apart. That was the moment for me leaving corporate structures. I was working at a motor generator company. Okay. And I'm watching person with gout, MS, all these medical conditions that I said, if I stay here, I'm going to die here. Because what they're working for, it either gets so wrapped up in their identity that afterwards they have no purpose in life. So there's no reason to live. Or we watch people with children, their kids became their whole life. Kids leave the house, they have no purpose, they get sick. And so it's not just a thing, something we want to doing self-work is nice. It's that health runs on a continuum from ease to dis-ease. What you do or don't do moves the dial, not just diet and exercise. It's ease in general. We've worked with bodybuilders, doing athletes, all these different, I would say, very fit looking people that are so either OCD and internalized stress, their digestion is a wreck. They have all these body pains. They don't have ease, so they're not healthy. They just know how to wear trauma on the outside so no one can see it, right? They just have a stronger armor to hold it in. And so what we started to see was where can we create ease? Because a body in ease can heal. And so working with different modalities for relaxation, not just rest. High performers learn how to rest for the purpose to drive further, only to go harder later. But if you look at like an F1 race or a racing car, it's not just the gas that wins the race. The brake is as important. So good biohackers, good high performers learn the brake is important, but they're only doing it for the purpose of the race, but they're never turning the engine off. And so it's not just going into the pit to change a tire. It's not just brakes on the turns. It's actually teaching the body how to relax. And that's something when we talked about Sean Wells at the beginning, that was one of the first things he commented on is someone that had been biohacking. I mean, that's literally his job. He's like one of the most well-known biohackers, health experts, period, the end, that he never knew how to relax. And a body that is in a rest state is one thing. In a relaxed state can heal far more effectively. So meditation and all those things are tools towards relaxation, but it doesn't work for everyone. Right? Sometimes it's literally finding what is your unique method. And with what we teach at the Condor Approach, for example, we say it's psychedelic informed because we can speak to that too of what happens on the physiological, neurological, spiritual front. But it's more about the integration of the selves after a disintegration. Okay, now I see what I need to do, but what is the action plan? That's why we call it psychedelic informed coaching, because it's still coaching. But people go have the big experience, then they leave, they don't have a plan. So of course they fall back. You're leaving on a high, feeling great. No difference than a Tony Robbins platinum partner, whatever event. You go rah, feel amazing. I'm going to change everything. I'm going to make $1 million by Friday. And then you're hungry, tired, get in a fight with your partner, F the world, you give up.
Yes.
A lot is coming up around a few different things. And since this is all about countering and going in the other direction from the things we've been programmed in, the ideas around grief, the reframing of that and the work that we've done with grief is really important. Grief for us is the gateway to newness. And grief gets a bad rap. It's terrible. I don't want to feel this grief. And when you say, I don't want to feel this grief and you bury it, it's, I don't want to experience the newness. And so we're always experiencing newness. Everything that we have. If I walk outside and I trip and I twist my ankle and something happens and I can't do stuff, there's a newness that's happening. And so I actually have to grieve the attachment I had to not having this injury, delete, of course, right? The newness that I had to this, I have to actually grieve that. And so we have micro griefs and we have macro griefs, which would be like the death of a person in your family or something like that. But then there's the, I got a scratch on my car. My car was flawless and now I have to take it to the body shop. And then there's this record around my car and I will never forget that scratch. And this happened. there's a mourning process that happens. There's a grieving process where there's mourning and stuff. And so when we look at grief as the gateway to newness, we can change that dynamic and we start to look at what grief is telling us. What is this process telling? Am I attached to something in the past? Am I attached to an old identity, an old ego? Thank you. An old structure in the past. And so that newness opens up a new possibility when we look at grief differently. And that's one of the things, stop running from grief. Stop it. We dissolve the ego or the identity. We dissolve those things, ego dissolution, not ego death. You dissolve that for a while. You see what the new possibilities are and you lean into the new possibilities. It's going to come with discomfort because the newness is always unknown. You don't, if it's known, it's not new. It's something you're familiar with. And this is one of the things that people are they're looking for the safety of the old. And the cost of the new is letting go of the old. And when we let go of the old, we have to grieve the old. And so we're constantly, people are like, I want to be a millionaire. Okay. When you're a millionaire, you're going to have to let go of the thousandaire that you were, or the $100 ass person, right?
$100 ass.
Right?
I've been $1.99 for plenty of periods of my life.
I've seen a $100 motherfucker have $1 million and not know what to do with it. Because they're still applying those old dynamics to the situation. And so it's the same thing with everything in life. You have to actually be in a process to navigate grief and see what that looks like. And when your body is able to navigate grief with resiliency, the grieving process isn't as long and it doesn't stay and it's not as frequent because you are constantly shifting and changing. And this is where you can become a shapeshifter in the space and learn how to integrate experiences with more accuracy, more tact. You're game for the newness. And so you build a body around newness all the time. People ask me, Tah, what do you do for your workouts? What's your regimen? I'm like, I don't have a regimen. It's very intuitive. It's very new. I'm always challenging myself with new things. If you go on my Instagram, you'll see all these different moves and stuff that I'm doing. Where'd you get that from? I just made it up. Right? And because my body is always here for newness, it helps my mind adapt to newness and all the discomforts around the grief of who I was before, what I was before, all of those things. So I get to integrate. And when we have these different tools of integration, we are able to manage and navigate the grieving process of leaving behind who we were on a momentary basis, not just on special occasions like a funeral, but on a momentary basis. And when we use grief as a tool to see that we have newness coming, we may be attached to something. How do we let that go? And then reintegrate it with something else. Open it up and then reintegrate. So it's disintegration, integration, disintegration, integration. It's a wave.
It's so interesting that, I kind of opened with the share about that men's group and how that season came to a close. And there was a part of me that grieved that. And it was like, that was really special. And that's done.
Yeah, it's time to move on.
Yeah, there's a new season and whatever happens, happens. What also brought up for me was, I was a trader in Chicago for almost 20 years. I got out of the business in 2013. We moved down here. And I was like ready to be done. And I was ready to get into coaching and training and whatever that looked like. And it took many kind of different forms over the next handful of years. But it wasn't until about a year ago that I realized I never grieved the loss of me, the trader. And part of it was when I had my kind of awakening, whatever you want to call it, in 2017 and started to, the pendulum swung the other where it's like, oh, I'm not that guy. I'm not the trader. I'm this guy who's into all these other things that are cool and curious and I'm more evolved. I had, again, as you all know, like that's going to come back to bite me in the ass if I don't, reintegrate and love Trader Cal. I mean, that was such a part of who I am. The things I get to do is because I was Trader Cal for a while. And a great friend of mine, Boyd Vardy, we were on a podcast and he had shared, he goes, look, until you learn to love, really truly love Trader Cal, like you're going to have this there'll be discontent within your own kind of system. And so mourning the loss of me as the trader, because I did love that. When I was trading and it was busy and I was in my element. And I really loved that. And I thought just because I knew what I wanted to do next, that I didn't need to mourn that. And mourning that was such an important part of the process for me to truly move on from that version of me.
I have something for that. And we live in a society that's deficit and scarcity based. And when we look at transformation as loss, we focus on what we don't have. And the gateway to newness is the recognition that there's unlimited possibility moving forward. And every person that dies, everything that is gone or broken, leaves a gateway to open up into something new. That's a transformational space into potential. But if we're constantly focusing on what we don't have, we get locked in very myopic, very small, focused, hyper-masculinized, gotta see this and only see this. I can only see this loss. Meanwhile, there's potential rampant all around us. And the transformation that we can have with the new stuff is going to be uncomfortable because it's unknown. But the thing that we knew is the old stuff. And we are constantly focused on the old stuff. And we look at it from a deficit-based dynamic. I've had, how many people died in the past year? Gosh.
We're at 11.
11 people that were proximal to us died in the last year.
Whoa.
And some of my closest friends died.
We met grief, like really met grief this year in a whole new way.
And the things that have opened up in me as an individual, not just us as a couple, me as an individual that have opened up as a result of these people passing, the gifts that I've been able to support my clients with as a result of these people dying and me becoming familiar with this environment. What a gift. And so the gain that I've had as a result of them transforming into the force, right? Like they transformed into the force.
Wait, was that your Yoda?
Into the force.
It's pretty good.
So they've transformed into something different, into some other space. If I look at that as I've lost them, I can't see the gifts. When my friend Dom passed a year ago. January 16th was a year. And I went to see him on the 15th. And I flew back on the 15th. And I'm on the airplane and I'm like, oh my gosh, what if Dom dies? Dom was a 240-pound dude. When I saw him, he was 80 pounds. Okay? Cancer ate him from the inside out. And
I mean, you've been friends for
and I was like,
40
we've been
years.
friends for 40 years. And I was like, what if Dom dies? What is it? He means so much to me. And I was like, wait, he means so much. And I was like, what does Dom mean? And I popped open my journal and I started writing all the things that Dom meant, all the things in the ways that Dom contributed to my life and the things and the people that I've worked with. And I'm like, what a gift this man has been. And for his transition now to be a realization point for me to see all these gifts, that's not a loss. This is a win. This is a gain. And so I started looking at death very, very differently. And as a nurse, I've seen over 1,000 people die in front of me at the hospital. Over 1,000 people, Cal, in my life that I've seen die in front of me. And I've had war vets say, I've never seen that many people die. And I've seen a lot of people.
And New York City nights emergency rooms. So it's like,
gosh.
And the gift of this man passing and then the next person and then the next person and my closest friend, my best friend in Austin died in August. Yep. Dead. And Dom's passing actually supported me in that space. And I started to see the gifts and I started to see the realizations that I had around the contribution that this person had to me and all of the people around. And I was able to move that from a space of loss into a space of gain, into a space of newness and transformation. And that has helped me to re-articulate grief from a lost space into the gateway to newness.
Well, and that, the thing is people don't know how to mourn and how to grieve and how to meet their emotions, the sensations that come with it. And part of why we realized like our gift from all of the ceremonies and things over the years, what we discovered our gift was to take these very nebulous, hard to define concepts like emotions, like past experiences, but what does it mean in practice? What does it mean? How do I lay it out all in front? Because people have taken a little woo-woo approach to the point of you take a masculine structured mind that's used to organized ideas and throw them out into the ether, of course they don't know what to do with it when they come back. If I dropped you in the middle of China, assuming you don't speak Mandarin and that's what's in that region, there's a lot you're not going to understand. You can conceptually go, oh, well, that looks like a bathroom and that looks like a house. But to navigate around, you would struggle with it. And that's how it is in psychedelics. People go out into this new area. They don't speak the language and they come back not knowing how to translate it. And what we've been able to do is come up with processes to translate that emotions are signals. Your body sensations are a language. How to help a person translate what their body is telling them. What your biome, like if you actually tap into the intelligence of your body, it is genius. Not just your intuition, but your instincts. There's two parts to it. For me, the intuition is that softer voice that's, like the heart speaking or the soul. But then you have your instincts that can work against you. Because if when you were young, a man was dangerous, you may struggle with male relationships with masculine presenting men because you associate it to aggression or violence or harm. So your instincts could tell you that's dangerous, but your heart is craving connection. So in doing work in psychedelics, we've been able to show people in diagrams, in schematics, in process, your body's intelligence. Like look at the literal function of the body part that's infected, inflamed, chronic pain. Say someone's having IBS stomach issues. Upset stomach. What are you upset about? What are you digesting? Are you over digesting? You'll start to see it's not just happenstance that your body has these aches and pains. It's that some of these events are actually trapped, not just when you got hurt playing sports, but there was something else because in your right leg, you were about to step into a new echelon in your career as a sports person, as a education person, whatever. And the injury happened on that side because you didn't quite feel like you could take the next step. And so when we started to break it down, we were like, oh shit, this is our gift, is to help people give language before the ceremony. We're giving you we're going to give you the Rosetta Stone to go in. It's going to at least give you some context.
Yeah.
And then you're going to get in there and realize that there's a dialect aside from the context we gave you that's unique to you. So like we could teach you Spanish, but if you went to Dominican Republic versus Mexico, there's going to be a variance in the Spanish. So it's kind of like that we found this way to create a language for emotions and how to be with them, how to not cut things out, but expand to hold them all, to actually feel grief and love and joy all at the same time and not be so limited by one. People fear grief because they feel like they're going to be swallowed whole and never come out. And we say, if you'll actually allow yourself to be swallowed up by the grief, it's more like a rip current that'll pull you out to sea. But if you don't fight it, once the current stops, you'll be able to swim along the shore like they explain in rip currents to come back. And once people can see that, then they can allow it. Then they can start to trust their body's intelligence and what's informing it and what is their instincts versus their intuition. How do you know which no is speaking, your body or your intuition? Your instinct saying men are dangerous, or your intuition that says, but I feel like I want to connect and I trust this person, or I want to trust this person. And so there's that for us turned into what we're here to do. And that's when we transitioned out of, we don't even facilitate psychedelics currently. None of Tah's private clients, none of what we're teaching. We don't feel that is even the work. That's one area, sure. But the true gift is between Tah's 30 plus years as a nurse, triaging people, and he kept nurse notes on all of our clients in psychedelic spaces that we knew their whole history before we worked with them. And we saw that 8 out of 10 of our high performing biohackers either had a father that gave significance and love for high achievement or took it away if they didn't achieve. So the cold shoulder. So the performance equaled love, right? Or they had a father that was emotionally unavailable. And that could include physically. But 8 out of 10, it was father related, nothing to do with the mother. And so we started to see these patterns and trends that informed an entire process. And then Tah's always channeling new concepts. Yesterday morning, he's like, this one came through last night. I mean, we have hundreds of posters, hundreds of notebooks, hundreds of, it's never going to end,
Yeah.
like we talked about before. But I mean, he is the most brilliant, articulate, hot, sexy. That's obviously all true also. But if it wasn't for this work, like we're entering our fertility journey now, him at 53, me at 42. His daughter's grown. We have a 10-year-old grandson. And for the first time in our life, we are integrating what we've learned, who we've been, not rushing into having a baby or trying to, but actually giving our body space and time to integrate as we go into who we're becoming in this next phase. And there's no greater person. He has I told y'all heard some of my stories today, but Tah's got crazy stories. But like he said, that's also what drew us to each other, was this endless commitment to keep showing up, to take ownership and responsibility. And I will tell you, in 10 years of being together, we have never been mean, petty, cruel, called each other out of our name, because we sat down and did what most people won't do. And we created a what happens when plan. We get married every year to create a new contract and agreement. We are changing people. So we're not going to renew old people's agreements. And I've never met anyone like him. And that's probably why I proposed to him when we did.
She liked it, and then she put a finger.
It did.
Yeah. Hell yeah.
I did. I so did.
That's right.
Oh, you like that, Enzo. Okay, so I don't know if it's better to ask, who is this for or who is this not for? Like, describe, like, in whichever way makes the most sense, like, to work with y'all. What's it look like?
I'll start. I will say who it's not for. There are certain, I wouldn't say certain types of people, but certain processes that really struggle with what we do. And that's very rigid. If you are very rigid and you're not able, willing, or capable, or trust yourself enough to be guided, like if you choose to move this direction or working with us in any capacity or our trainings, it's going to push some things within you. We work with such a diverse range of people. It's not a certain type of person, but who it's not for is if you are anti anything and you will all 10 toes down stand on that, then this is not the battle for you, because we're not here to fight. We are here to confront, not conflict. And there is a difference.
Ooh, I like that.
So if you're willing to confront, if you are brave enough to see the parts within yourself, you're interested in learning how to hold space for yourself in the tough conversations. This is not the soft way. We're not going to pacify, and we're very kind. We understand the nervous system. We hold a lot of space. But at the same time, within all of that, you have to have done enough work to be able to hold your big emotions. Because in order to confront, you have to be able to hold space for yourself first in order to hold these concepts, because we go so deep into constructs and how you're being manipulated that those will come online, and you have to be willing to look at them. We're not saying change them. You have to be willing to look at them.
You have to be courageous to do this work.
Yeah.
And you have to be willing to step into the unknown. If you're looking to be fixed, this is not the work. This is a work of change, of shift, of growing, of expansion. And you're going to face, working with me, you're going to face
especially
a lot
with
him. You're going to face things that you haven't looked at, that you've probably tried to put Band-Aids on. And a lot of our healthcare system and our wellness systems puts Band-Aids on things. And this is where we start to open things up and really look at the inner workings of the human being. Not just the body, not just the mind, but the inner workings of the being, the whole self. And there are aspects of the self that may not want to be seen, and it's terrifying for those aspects to be seen. This is courageous work. And the people that work with me call me the done dude. When you're done with how you've been living, when you're done with the coaches that you've been going to that haven't been supporting you in getting your results, because you're the person who's getting the results, not me. When you're done,
and you define them.
When you're done with being told that your body's broken, that your relationships are broken, when you're done with that, you come see me. When you're finished with all of that and you're ready to really look at yourself and see that you are capable of anything and everything that is your wildest dream, then you come see me.
I would say, like, when it comes to Tah's ability to help someone get in the integrity they want to be. So we all have parts where we are our future self, we're kind of in dialogue with that future self who we're striving to be. And I would say Tah is really the one that comes when you say, here's how I want to be in integrity. And I can feel it's keeps sliding off in this area. Like, what's going on? It's kind of like helping someone identify, well, we just need to put a cast support system on this part to let it heal a little bit. It's like having someone to analyze the structure and go, oh, well, it's not anything wrong with you. You know what I mean? Like, there was a leak in that ceiling that degraded this one beam. We just need to replace that beam to get you in integrity. So it's like for the person that's been doing the work and they just are feeling still a little wobbly, we just need to tighten some bolts and tighten some things up. And I feel like that's really where Tah shines, is people that honestly none of their tactics will work to deflect or distract away from what they want.
Yeah.
Because his ability to map it and then reflect it back to them, and they go, oh, I couldn't see that. So it's really that someone that's studied all the NLP, gone to Tony Robbins, and they feel like they've done all the things and psychedelics.
Yeah.
And they're like, either they're that tricky and meticulous at manipulation, and I don't mean that in a negative way,
sure,
but they're just like, no, I can pull the wool over. Like, I'm really good at this. So my unconscious parts are really good at this. Because those are survival-based things that make us great at our jobs and all that too. Then I feel like that's when for Tah, the people that thrive and love him the most are the ones where they're like, dude, that was so good, because they already know a lot of the language, that they need the person that can take them on the deep dive. They're like, I've got my diver's license. I've got the master diver. Like, I want to go see what's down there, because there's still something I'm not seeing with this other kind of, like, I've been practicing in the pool with the scuba tank.
Honesty is a big part of this, that what I said before. And there are many ways that we can be dishonest. It's not just lying. It's evasion. It's masking. It's people pleasing.
Withholding.
It's withholding. All of these things are forms of not being in your true, full expression. And people have been taught to bury these things. And you're talking to a person who lied about everything. Cal, you don't have legs, right? I'd convince you that you don't have legs, right? And this is part of it. Is I have such an expansive lens for dishonesty because of the length, not just to which I was dishonest with other people, but to the length I was dishonest with myself. And to be able to really face my stuff and to know the nervous system quirks and the things that come up and the ability to hide from myself. I had one person, Will Reason?
Of course, yes.
Will Reason sat with me, and he does somatic stuff and he goes into body stuff. He said, Tah, you probably have the trickiest nervous system I've ever come up against.
That's saying something, because he's seen a lot of nervous systems.
It's literally his job.
He said, you have a tricky nervous system, because my nervous system knows how to be evasive, and it will follow another nervous system's quirks to find the hole in what they can see. And so this is why I'm able to see this stuff. And this is why me being honest is so important, because when I hold it in my body, I can feel it. And that's where this honesty thing comes into play, is people have been taught. Most people generally want to be honest, but they've been taught that who they are is so fundamentally broken that it will hurt other people. It will hurt other people, and other people knowing their truth will hurt them. That is where we stop being honest and we start getting into protection mode, and it is deficit based, which is founded in shame. And this is where I have such a huge lens for shame and these dynamics. And I don't put people down for lying. I don't fire my clients for being dishonest. If you're dishonest, our process is going to be challenging. And so I need you to be honest. That's why the first day I'm with my clients, 12 hours in front of each other, so that their bodies can see that anything they say. I don't care if you said, man, the aliens came and they stuck probes in my asshole. I don't care. Tell me about it. I'm not judging that. Tell me what's going on. Tell me what you experienced. I want to know. And when you can see that I'm an unwavering acceptance and cheerleader for you, then
the
you
real
can
stuff
can fall into safety, and all your stuff will come up over a gradient of time.
When we first got together, before we were really officially seeing each other, or as Tah says, we were doing the horizontal mambo.
Brown chicken, brown cow.
Correct. I had so many problems. My doctors told me I needed to replace my right knee because I didn't have any cartilage and all these things. And Tah said, give me 4 months before you talk about any other surgical things. Give me 4 months. And within 4 months, where doctor said I'll never run, jump, do high intensity, whatever. 4 months later, I was certified as an insanity instructor, which anyone that knows fitness knows Sean T and insanity.
Shit.
And that became my full-time job. I taught 14 to 16 insanity classes per week. And then I was Beachbody Instructor of the Year. And so it took not just because he's a personal trainer. So we had that piece plus the nurse piece.
Yeah.
Plus understanding the medications and surgeries I'd had and all that created. But then it was the emotional parts. I'd be lifting weights and Tah would ask questions about a parent and you would see deficits or changes in the strength according to the person, the side, which if you learn about dynamics existing on different sides of the body. And so it was exploring my body through all these things that I was like, dude, what freaking ninja, what is this? But I'd never seen it before, right? So I joke that he got my body in shape and strong and all that again, and then he got to keep it. Hey, great investment.
Craft and shape.
How can people work with y'all?
You can't work with me. I am currently I am being present for my body in the process of conceiving. So if you want to come work with me, at the live events are the only way. Okay. And I support our coaches. So the people that we train in a year container, they work with me. But besides that, you can't. But I tell people, I usually send people to Tah. And honestly, even between us, we have trained tons of coaches now of all kinds, from performance coaches to shaman medicine carriers, that if we don't have the answers, we have someone great that's trained in this stuff. Or if you want to learn this stuff for sure. But it's we have 3-day trainings. If it sounds interesting, pop in for 3 days. We give all the schematics, all the emotional navigation, all the tools, the OTT we talked about. We have people come for 3 days and therapists that say they learned more in those 3 days in the application for humanity and helping people than they did in any of their personal practice or their schooling.
Condor Approach.
Yeah.
The Condor Approach.
So you've got one coming up here the 20th of February?
Yep. February and then September.
Okay.
That's the months we keep them.
Every February, every September. And, for those people who are really interested into diving deep, they can call me. I have a website called calltah.com. CALLTAH. And if you're brave enough to call me.
Careful, because he'll answer.
I will.
If he's available.
If I'm not in a situation, I will pick that phone up and we'll get on the phone. But call me if you're ready. If you're ready to dive into it, call me. My number's on there. Okay. And you will get this phone right here. Call me.
I've never heard of that. That's epic.
Calltah.com. Working with me is a minimum of a year-long process. Mm-hmm. Right? I would love it for most people to only work with me for a year. And then if we need to do more after that, we'll do a retainer situation. But people have me in their back pocket for a year. And if you're ready to dive into stuff over a year-long period, you didn't get where you are overnight. So it's going to take some time. And if you're ready to dive into that, call Tah.com and work with me for a year and let's dive into it. But you're going to invest your time. And if you're not interested in investing money into what you're doing, I'm not your guy either. Because I am invested in this space. I only take on 4-year-long clients at a time, one-on-one. And then the rest will be, I have small group things that I work in. And
he'll do 2 retreats a year. So there's opportunities.
There's opportunities. But if you want to dive in, call me.
Love that. And Instagram.
The Condor Approach, you can find us is the easiest way. CondorApproach.com is the live events for anyone, the 3-day trainings.
Do you have a book on Amazon?
We do, the Condor Approach. You'll literally throw a smoke signal, a carrier pigeon, Condor Approach will get you there. I think Amazon's actually been selling out. We need to find another option because it's not fast enough. Because we have facilitators that are actually buying 30 at a time to give them at their retreats. It's a 7-day integration guide. Oh. But you can get the digital version for free if you go to freeguide.vip. So you can get the PDF version totally for free, printed at home, Kinko's.
And the OTT is in there.
The OTT is in there.
All of that stuff is
how to body map. But if you're going into a medicine ceremony, especially, or any transformational, grab that and do that for 7 days after. It'll help you integrate.
I love that. You guys are awesome. Thanks so much for being here and sharing. This is awesome. Just a bit of the story. I know there's so much more. I can't wait for round 2. Yeah. Much love to y'all.
Thank you.